Welcome back to Media7, where we're looking at perception and reality in the criminal justice system. In this week's Source, Sam Mulgrew looks at the hard data.
The war on crime is never ending. Last year, government spent $3.7 billion on the sector, up 38% in 5 years, while the number of convictions has risen by more than a quarter to 250,000 cases in 2009. If all those defendants held hands and got in a line, they'd snake all the way from Gisborne to Taupo. Almost 9,000 new prison sentences are handed down each year. The majority of inmates are inside for violence or sexual offending. The badass United States takes away the freedom of almost 4 times more people than we do. But even down at 60th position on the Global Incarceration Index, New Zealand is trailed by the First World. Our jail demographics by no means match life on the outside. 93.5% of sentenced prisoners are male, and a quarter of inmates are aged 17 to 25. Māori make up 15% of New Zealand's population, but they account for more than 50% of prisoners. And yet, rates of reoffending following release from jail shows more than 60% of crims released in 2007 and 8 were back in the dock within 24 months. Well, I guess we can always build new prisons or perhaps add more tiers to the bunks.
I'm joined now by 2 senior journalists, listener Deputy Editor David Lomas, whose work was recently described as cerebral and balanced by the Court of Appeal, and newspaper feature writer of the year Tony Wall of the Sunday Star Times. Welcome to you both, gentlemen.
Hi.
Now, David, what do you make of these statistics we've just seen? You're working on the story on the penal system, aren't you? So, in that light, they're alarming.
They are alarming, but the recidivism thing is the really bad one. I mean, we send these people to prison, we do nothing about it. I mean, you know, the rate for young offenders, for instance, is something like 70% of them are back in, under 20-year-olds are back in within 2 years. The idea that prison does something for something has been proved wrong. I mean, lots of the criminologists and people who study this have just shown that actual prison is not the answer.
But that's not the story we read and hear day to day in the news, is it?
It's not because, well, basically, I mean, the media get it wrong too often. We go to the wrong people. We let the people like sensible sentencing have too much say, and we don't go to the criminologists, the people who are experts. I mean, I was talking to, I think he's Professor John Pratt out of Victoria, and he basically has banned a lot of newspapers simply because he finds them too inane.
Why is that? Do editors have a case to answer here? I mean, is it just that Garth McVicker is always there when you call him?
He's there, he gives a good soundbite, he gives a good grab, easy, you know, sensational, it's good. And it's much harder to get to do the backstory and find out what really happens. I mean, Judge Johnson was saying before that, you know, if you listen to what is said when people are sentenced, a lot of it makes sense, but we don't get that, we just get the short bit.
Now, Tony, I want to talk to you about crime reporting and the reality, because you used to work for the Sydney Daily Telegraph, did you not?
Yes, yes.
I have some choice quotes from here. The difference between official crime statistics announcements and what turns up in the Telegraph. Official announcement, downward trend in knife attacks in New South Wales, appears in the Daily Telegraph as stabbings skyrocket as knives plague city. Property crime rates lowest for 17 years, turns up as streets police cannot defend. Exclusive, criminals get free run as justice fails. What hope is there?
If it bleeds, it leads in the Daily Telegraph, I tell you. They'll go for the sensational headline because it sells, and of course crime sells. It's the old story. Always has done, and so yeah, it's a very tabloid sort of approach, of course, but doesn't surprise me, unfortunately. And there is a bit of an element of that creeping in here too, I think.
I get the impression, though, in both of your work, you've done enough of this that you tend to have a more nuanced view. Is there an element of experience there that?
Yeah, and it's about sort of time and resources available to you. If you know you're getting a quick reaction outside of a courtroom where emotions are boiling over and so on. Family is outraged by the sentence that's just been handed down. You know, you do tend to just sort of fire that reaction straight through. It's not until you take a backward step and sort of think about it a bit more, perhaps, and myself and David are probably fortunate that we do have the time.
Because that's probably that's the classic trope of court reporting, isn't it? Family outraged by sentence.
Yeah, and it's become so common now that it's hackneyed and it's hardly even used
It's become
anymore.
dog bites man.
Yeah, it's like, who's going to read that story? Family outraged by sentence. I'd be more interested in reading the opposite. Family happy with sentence.
Have you ever written that story, David?
Well, you do get it. I mean, you know, you've seen the cases down in the lady who was knocked off the bike, or one of her family members was, and they were quite strong. But I mean, the other thing is, I mean, the police are also behind a lot of that. You get the after-court comments from the police are often quite almost as bad as sensible sentencing, and those are easy grabs too. You know.
Do you think that the police at least try and manipulate news coverage in that respect? That sometimes they seem to stage a perp or so that TV gets the pictures?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you know, and that's a thing that's come in recent years, of course. I mean, for many years it was sort of, they did their best to hide them from us, and then now they just can't help but put them in front of us. Yeah. So,
you actually made a TV series about the district court. How did that go? What happened there?
Well, I thought it was good, but TVNZ didn't see quite the same light. They put it on at a bad hour, but I mean, it gave a good. We were lucky we got 5 cameras in there, and we were able to film the whole thing, and give time to a case. And when it's that study from Tasmania shows, if you give time and knowledge, then people understand what the sentencing is about. And you know, if you sit in the back of the court and you listen to what a judge says, and they often give very, very good explanations of why they're sentencing, you understand what's going on. But when we get to the newspaper, a lot of that detail is not there anymore.
And yet we don't even get it from the television, do we? Even though cameras are in court, we very rarely get that rounded sense of what the judge has said.
Yes, yeah, it's the too shorter, the 1.5 minute news track, and it's very hard to get enough in, especially if you want the really good shots, of course. So, well, good shots from a television point of view, not necessarily from an understanding point of view.
Tony, when you're writing a crime and punishment story, what are you aiming to do?
Well, you are aiming to, if it's a longer piece, you're wanting to get behind the reasons really for the crime, and it's far more nuanced than what you can do in a short sort of reacting story. But the story that I always come back to that amazes me the most is one that we ran last year, which was an article by Christchurch woman Emma Woods, whose son was run over by a driver down there and killed. And Michael Laws, your favourite man, wrote an article criticising her for forgiving this young guy because it kept him out of prison. And she wrote the most incredible article for us in the Sunday Star Times, where she was just really well-reasoned, well thought out, explaining why she felt the way she did about him. She said, look, everybody's judged this young guy based on sensational headlines at the time. He's not the hoon that we all assume he is. He doesn't have a history, and she didn't think prison was the right answer for him. And
but it's okay for victims, the families of victims, to feel angry, though, isn't it? I mean, what I keep getting from you and from the judge is that maybe there's too much focus on victims, but they have a role in the story, don't they?
Well, they always seem to be very angry, and I guess you can't blame them. They've lost a loved one, of course. But I just wonder how they would react to some of the findings that the jury in Australia had, and whether some of them perhaps would. If you did a survey of them, how many of them would be happy with the sentences that were handed down in their case?
No, I take it neither of you were surprised by any element of that Tasmanian study.
Well, I'd love to know more about what jurors are thinking, and I'd like a system more like in America where you're actually allowed to speak to jurors. The occasional time that I've tried it, I've ended up in the judge's chambers getting wrapped over the knuckles.
And I have to say, I asked the judge about that before the show, and he did not think that was a good idea. I mean, would you like to be able to interview jurors?
Well, I have in the past, but then they changed the law after that. But
I hope it wasn't your story.
I'm not quite sure. But I was fortunate enough to actually be on a jury once, and it was fascinating. It was an aggravated robbery, and 6 tough-looking Samoan guys. The jury sat in there and just said they're guilty, guilty. And there's 2 of us who said they weren't. And anyway, they ended up they were not guilty. And when the not guilty plea came in, the Samoan guys all smiled, their families smiled, and they came up and hugged the jury and went back in the jury room, and they just said totally different idea of the people, just from that. They'd formed an impression from their look, And when they met the people, they were just absolutely crying, you know.
So perhaps the answer is for more of us to serve on juries. Well, thank you, David Lomas and Tony Wall. And now we change gear into Top Gear, in fact, with Sarah Daniel.
Tonight, the Stig tries to flip a Suzuki. I attempt to make a Volvo look cool. The ashtray is completely accessible. And we interview a motoring guru. Top Gear has gone from a global powerhouse to a joke worn thin. Critics say the presenters have disappeared up their own asses, and that Mexican joke was an epic fail.
Because cars reflect national characteristics, don't they? So Mexican cars just going to be a lazy, feckless, flatulent oafers, leaning against a fence asleep, looking at a cactus with a blanket with a hole in the middle on as a coat.
Top Gear's own producer has said the show is dangerously close to running out of road. So we asked veteran motoring journalist Jackie Madeline, if Top Gear were a car, how would she describe it?
Probably a high mileage example, getting a bit battered, but with a little bit of TLC and some proper maintenance, it could have a few kilometres in it yet.
Top Gear's fortunes have changed. What do you attribute that to?
Yeah, I think it's kind of got hoisted by its own entertainment petard. It's like it found a formula that really worked. You know, boys behaving badly, they're always fun to watch. But after a while you get a bit tired of the tricks, you've seen it all before, and then how do you top it?
Fitted with a steering wheel, the Cultus is a little gem. It appears to have been designed by a lunatic. When they made the Suzuki Cultus, they ticked all the boxes. Top Gear magazine is one of New Zealand's biggest selling magazines. What's the difference? What are they doing right that the show is perhaps less successful at now?
I think the TV show stresses entertainment over information, and sometimes almost to the exclusion of information. What the magazine does is it gets the balance between the two. So some of the mainstream magazines are almost car nerd. You know, if you want the anal detail, you get it from them. And that, unless you're a car nerd, is just dull. Whereas Top Gear gets that balance. You can have a bit of fun, you can pick up a bit of information, but it doesn't entertain over the top of the information, if you see what I mean.
The Volvo has built a sound and solid reputation, and it's easy to see why you'd feel protected. It's like being clad in pig iron. A large share of the audience of Top Gear have been women. It's a chick magnet. What's that about?
I think it's back to some of the stunts they did in the early days. You know, who doesn't want to see what happens when you cut the roof off a car and try and turn it into a boat, or, you know, see if you can jump from one aircraft carrier to another. It's funny. It's hooligan stuff with a sense of humour. But once you've done that once and twice and 3 times, it just loses its freshness.
You've been a motoring journalist now for about 17 years. Have you encountered sexism many occasions?
Yes, I think probably the most common one is the assumption that I'm just a PR chick. So, for example, I flew over to France to interview one of the Peugeot family and sat down at the journalist table, and they kept hauling me away bodily because they said this is not a PR table, it's for journalists. And they wouldn't listen to anything I was saying.
And on that bombshell, it's back to you, Russell.
Sarah Daniel there in a naked attempt to write off the tax on their Volvo. And with that, our show. Thanks again to Chief Judge Russell Johnson, David Lomas and Tony Wall. And thanks to you for joining us. We'll be back with Media7 at the same time next week. Until then, goodbye.